November 19th, 2020. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Make sure you turn off all your toys. And mute your microphone when you're not speaking to improve the quality of the meeting. Rob, will you do a roll call for attendance?
Yes. Trustee Lanfair?
Yes, sorry.
Yes. Trustee Apatow?
Here.
Trustee Dearborn?
Here.
Trustee Coladarchi?
Here.
Trustee Kripe?
Here.
President Rintz?
Here?
And Trustee Swerk will join us shortly.
All right. Public comment. Kristen, has anybody submitted public comment that is not pertinent to this evening's agenda?
President Rintz, we have received no public comment via email, nor are there any members of the public in the room or at Village Hall currently.
Gotcha. Well, thank you very much. All right, item 3 is budget review. Tonight is the final budget review session for
Afraid, Chris, you are frozen.
Chris, you're frozen.
Tell your kid to get off internet.
Am I dead?
You're back in voice, if not in image.
We thought your back went on again.
You kind of look like you might be having a stroke, but it's okay.
My brain went out again. Okay. Anyway, Kristen will do the village manager's office and economic development budgets. Then Brian Keys will scintillate us with 41 PowerPoint slides to go over the water and electric budget. So if you can still hear me, we'll turn it over to Tony and let him go at it.
Hi, thank you, President Rintz and Council. My name is Tony Vasquez. I'm the Assistant Finance Director, and I will be presenting the Finance Department budget for 2021. Before I get started, I'd like to thank Tim for his help with the presentation, as well as our Accounting Manager, Del Duckworth, for her help with preparing the budget documents. If you look in your budget binder, tab 5 has the Finance Department. Okay, next slide, please. This is our organizational chart for the Finance Department. It is consistent with prior year as there's been no changes to personnel in the department. Next slide. This is an overview of the Finance Department. For the 2021 year, our budget for our department will be $1,553,646, which is up 1% from prior year, excluding contingency. Next slide, please. There are several significant accomplishments that the Finance Department had in 2020. We recently went through a bond refunding, resulting in savings of over $7.1 million in total debt service. As part of that refunding process, Moody's affirmed our AAA bond rating. Two of the major projects that the department goes through each year are preparation of our annual budget, as well as preparing our annual financial statements for our audits. Each year, our goal is to submit for the GFOA awards for presentation of those documents. And once again, the Finance Department was successful in winning both of those awards. In fact, recently, I had the chance to attend a virtual seminar for the National GFOA, which was to help improve your budget. I saw that Winnetka's budget was used in this presentation as an example for best practices. Given the amount of time and hard work that goes into our budget preparation, it's nice to see recognition from the GFOA that it is a very good document that others should strive for. We completed our audit this year with an unqualified audit opinion and a clean management letter, which means that no internal control deficiencies or material weaknesses were identified. This year, Something new we had to adjust to was tracking costs related to COVID-19 expenses. We did this so that we could submit for any possible federal reimbursements of those expenses. We've already applied for and received just shy of $95,000 through the CARES Act. We found out there is additional funds that could be available that we've also applied for under CARES. And both Tim and I have attended seminars and trainings so that we can learn the process that FEMA will require for their reimbursement. And we will soon be undertaking that project as well. Next slide, please. Just continuing the accomplishments, we've worked to develop some stormwater financing plans, which will be part of the upcoming discussions for stormwater. We've worked to help enhance our cybersecurity initiatives. And we've also, in 2020, switched our insurance to ICRMT, which helped to significantly reduce the village's risk exposure, bringing our deductible down from $2 million to $100,000. Next slide, please. Looking forward to the year ahead, some of our goals and objectives for 2021 are to continue to safeguard the village's financials and continue to enhance cybersecurity initiatives. Very soon we'll be starting work on our 2020 annual audit, and not too far down the road from there, we'll be getting work on our 2022 annual budget. We look to continue to responsibly manage the village's investments and treasury. We'll continue any kind of work to help maintain stormwater financing plans. In the upcoming year, we will provide financial analysis to the utility funds so that we can help identify sustained funding to take care of long-term infrastructure needs. And again, with our annual audit and annual budget, we will continue to strive to win the GFOA awards for both of those documents. At this time, I'm happy to take any questions the council may have.
Tony, I've got one question. On the budget, can you go through a little bit on the contingency fund? You don't include that, I don't think, in your, the department budget. And I see last year we had 200,000 and we went into contingency for 375, it looks like, and we bumped it up to 300 for the current year. So maybe give a little recap of 2020, how we went into the contingency and why, what we're thinking about that for 2021.
Yes. In 2020, we've used the contingency for the sales tax rebate program, which has been used to help our local businesses in town during the COVID-19 impacts that they've been facing. As part of moving that from 200,000 up to 300,000 for next year, that amount of 100,000 came from some of the savings that we will have based on restructuring the public safety pension funding.
Oh, it's the contingency is 200,000. It used to be 300,000. Then recently we had lowered it down to 200,000 in the last one or two budget cycles. And then with the current environment and a lot of uncertainty, we thought it would be prudent to bump it back up $100,000 to that $300,000 threshold. So currently for this year, the only thing that we did use the contingency for was that sales tax rebate program. So all the other expenses related to COVID, we've programmed out of other funds.
So Tim, is the 375 that's being used for 2020, is that all part of the sales tax? I mean, we haven't spent that much. We're not going to spend that much in 2020.
We won't. The estimate the estimates in the budget document were made right around the end of September, beginning of October. So I estimated basically a full spend out of that program. If every eligible entity was granted their full maximum amount, that's kind of was the assumption I used. So I don't think we'll hit that full estimate amount.
So if we, per Andy's thought the other night, if we re-up on that program, is that going to come out of the contingency fund again?
We would have to take a look, but that would be a likely place that we could take that out of, would be the contingency, potentially the contingency, or, perhaps we could find other funds. I guess it would depend on when that program was implemented, and what the status of, other budget accounts might look like. But I would guess that would probably be a likely spot that it would come out of.
Okay.
Trustee Dearborn, the program deadline is December 1st. Kristen and her staff will be evaluating the participants up to that date. And it's possible we may come to the council with a recommendation before the end of the year to determine how to allocate additional funding if there's funds left over.
Yes, and we're being very active. Liz DeChant has been doing consistent outreach to the full list of eligible businesses to ensure that they are aware of the program, especially some of the smaller businesses. And she has made contact with all but 34 of the businesses on the original 95. We expect will have by the deadline filled out the rebate application form. So we will be able to provide next month an update on the status, what funding is available, and then ideas for a potential new program that we're vetting right now.
Okay, so we did not go into contingency for anything other than that
Correct.
rebate program.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And that's
good.
essentially where we're accounting for it, since there weren't other accounts set up for this program. So
Right.
we accounted for it in contingency. It's essentially fund balance draw of the savings from the prior year.
And Rob, if the full max had been drawn upon by the merchants and so on, we would have, gone over the contingency by 100,000 or whatever.
Or we would have found another opportunity, another place to
Yeah.
account for it within the fund. So the account would have
Right.
been over.
Because
Right,
remember,
okay.
the funding source was the positive results from 2019. So
Correct.
it was that accumulated fund balance that wasn't conceived of when the 2020 budget was adopted. So that
So
was a decision and supported by the council to charge those to contingency.
So I guess my question, or part of the question, is if we re-up on another program, is that contingency fund sufficient if that's where we plan to draw the funds from?
And we'll follow up with you on that.
Yeah, okay,
Once we have a sense of the utilization of this year, we'll come back to you with the funding source,
fair enough.
the
Thanks,
accounting
Rob.
source. Okay.
Yeah, it's great that we're getting reimbursed the 95,000 from CARES. What is FEMA reimbursing for? And what kind of money could be coming back to us potentially?
So for year to date, we spent so far a little over $200,000 for COVID related expenses on things like PPE, cleaning supplies, technology improvements, sanitation, everything you can might imagine to try and keep Village Hall clean and our employees safe. And a lot of those expenses are reimbursable. Definitely anything related to cleaning supplies and PPE and sanitation and the technology, a lot of that will be reimbursable. FEMA is reimbursable up to 75% on those eligible costs.
Okay.
So we'll have, and the way it works is that if, money submitted to CARES, you can't submit to FEMA. But we were able to find expenses to be able to submit to CARES that do not overlap with FEMA. So what that entire $200-some thousand that we spent to date, we're gonna comb through the application and identify as much as that is eligible as possible and submit that all to FEMA with the hope to get a 75% reimbursement.
I think that's great. I think I know the answer to this question. Money we have given to businesses to keep them going is not eligible in any way for CARES?
That would be my understanding that is not eligible for CARES or FEMA reimbursement at this time.
Correct.
Well, maybe even the broadest interpretation of possibly, but
We're trying to maximize each bucket
Yeah.
wherever we can.
good. Thank you.
Other questions?
No, I would just like to say, I think that's awesome relative to the demonstrated quality of our budget materials being used as an example. So hats off to everybody. I think that's pretty darn wonderful. So hopefully we can, put that in some of our materials out to the public to let them know that you guys are a quality shop.
Well, which raises a point, Penny. Are we going to be doing, and Tim, maybe this is your area, Rob, maybe yours, are we going to be doing a summary transmittal
Yes.
to the public on this?
Yeah.
Like
So
we have?
I believe Trustee Dearborn, for the last 2 years, we've had a budget message. We're planning on developing one at the conclusion of tonight and the introduction of the budget on the 1st. So in that window of time, we'll be working on a budget message and share it with all of you before it's sent.
Great.
Great.
And that'd be a place to put that. That's terrific. Thank you, guys.
And these budget materials, Tim, are really good. I mean,
Oh, thank you.
it's really thorough. So terrific.
Thank you. And the finance team and Tony and Dell, they do a lot of
Yep.
work helping to put that together. So appreciate it.
Yep, we're aware of that. Thank you.
And no questions for me. Thanks, Tony. Good job, Tony and Tim and team. Really appreciate it.
Great job,
Tony.
Tony.
I had a brief question.
Go ahead, Jack.
Thanks. So we got 95,000 on CARES, and there are $200,000 total in funds being sought from, at this point, FEMA. Are there more funds that I know you can't estimate going forward what these costs might be related to COVID, but do you have costs that you're getting ready to put forward but haven't yet, that are outside of the 200,000 for FEMA and CARES? I'm just trying to get an idea. Is there some outstanding number there?
If CARES were re-upped, if we got a new pot money available, because right now we've submitted expenses to up to the maximum amount, there would be some additional costs that are not eligible for FEMA, certain salary type expenses that were eligible in CARES that we could potentially submit for. Other things that we would be looking for, some type of lost revenue reimbursements. If there was any type of programs that the federal government might come through for that would be something that we could be eligible for in the future. For FEMA, the eligible expenses run through the declarative disaster emergency period, which right now extends, I believe, I think they extended it to the middle of January at this point, the official federal declaration as far as FEMA. So if that gets extended, any future expenses in March. So what we're looking to draw a cutoff as of about October 31st and do a submittal, and then we'll be doing a follow-up submittal at the end of the disaster period to pick up any expenses that have accumulated after that point. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Last shot at Tony and Tim. Okay, we'll move forward. Kristen, you're at bat.
Thank you, President Rentz. Thank you for the opportunity to present the budget for the Public Affairs and Village Manager's Office. This is tab 4 in your budget book. Both of these departments are within the general fund budget. The Public Affairs Department focuses on village-wide support and council-related initiatives. And the Manager's Office budget provides for departmental specific operations and staffing. The Village Manager's Office accounts are separated by divisions for administration, economic development, and human resources. This is our organization chart for the Manager's Office. The total full-time equivalence has remained unchanged from 2020 into 2021 at 7.0. Note that the Economic Development Coordinator position was budgeted as a full-time position in 2020. Liz DeChant, who is currently serving in that role, is working approximately 25 to 30 hours a week as she finishes her master's degree at the University of Illinois, Chicago. We're excited to announce she is graduating in December next month and will be joining the village full-time in January. And I also want to note a new name under the assistant village manager since last year's budget. And at this time, I want to thank the entire village manager's office team, Ann Erickson, human resources generalist, Lizzie Storkman, our benefits coordinator, Liz DeChant, our economic development coordinator, and Josie Clark, our communications manager. And finally, Kathy Scanlon, our executive assistant who retired but is still helping out about 1 day a week to get us through the end of this year. So our 2020 accomplishments. Number one is we managed the village's COVID-19 global pandemic response. I know the AVM has other responsibilities, but right now, lion's share really is related to COVID-19 and the policies and supporting the staff, as well as the business community. We supported the community development and public works departments with the phase 2 streetscape project, and then launched the new village website, rebranded village communications, expanded our social media presence, and utilized social media for local business support. Additionally, we conducted entry-level testing for our police and fire departments, coming up with new lists, which was especially challenging with the remote testing protocols in response to COVID-19 restrictions. And to give you some idea of the time frame on this, we had a date set in mid-March for the test to be conducted in person and had to switch on a dime to figure out with the testing company a remote protocol that we successfully implemented and now have 2 new lists for entry police and fire. We also conducted promotional testing for fire commander and the lieutenant positions, and then spent a lot of time supporting our local businesses during the pandemic. And there is a full list here of the many things that we did to support our businesses during COVID-19. The 2020 new hires class of 2020, the pictures are smaller or larger and the class is smaller than last year. If you were to look at this slide that was presented in the prior year budget, there were actually 15 new hires. And this shows the incredible fiscal restraint that the village was under as a result of the financial impact of COVID. As the council is aware, we did put in a hiring freeze in May when it became apparent the financial impact. And we hired this year, as of this point, critical workers. We had some turnover in plant operator and water and electric, and we did hire those critical positions, as well as the water and electric analyst position, which was in process when we put in the hiring freeze. And I am really grateful. If you notice my hire date, March 9th of 2020. What a time to start a new position. Next, I would like to cover our 2021 goals and objectives. We want to continue to act as an ombudsman to the local business community, engage in dialogue with our stakeholders. Our crisis community strategy we want to improve, increase our engagement with the village website and social media. We're going to encourage business expansion, attraction, and redevelopment, specifically focusing on 93 Green Bay Road and new businesses. And in human resources, we're looking to recruit and retain excellent talent, update our employee handbook, do wellness initiatives, and police promotional testing. With regards to communication, we're really going to focus on growth and development of our email newsletters, our social media. The Distinctly Winnetka program is gaining traction. And then the 911 Smart needs to be updated regularly so that that remains available in an emergency. We're also adding a new initiative, social media archiving software, which will automatically archive all of our social media interactions, and that's really important for FOIA purposes. We also plan some special publications related to the potential refuse program changes, the upcoming stormwater program, and then the new resident guide. With regards to economic development, we do foresee continuing to support our local businesses navigating COVID-19. We're going to develop print and electronic marketing branded materials for business expansion and attraction, continue to sponsor local events that bring residents and visitors to our business district, and actively participate and support the chamber, merchant groups, and the North Shore Convention and Visitors Bureau. In human resources, a big initiative continuing in 2021 is our COVID-19 response, attracting and retaining those quality candidates. We also are going to undertake village-wide training initiatives, including anti-harassment, workplace incident reporting, and new supervisor training. And then we really are looking to enhance our wellness committee initiatives. Finally, the key drivers of the Public Affairs and Village Manager's Office. You can see in total, our budget request is down 4.2% over the prior year ask. At this time, I would be happy to entertain any questions related to these budget line items.
Hey, Kristen, I have a question.
Yes.
How is it you managed to stay in light of everything that you were hit when you walked in the door? Man, it's incredible reviewing all of that.
Winnetka has been an amazing opportunity for me and my career and personally. And I say this in all honesty. From the first interview, I knew that this was the community that I wanted to be a part of and serve with. This team, this community, having served here before in a consulting role all those years ago, it really felt like coming home. And I'm so happy to be here.
That is so lovely. Thank you so much. That's an amazing lineup of stuff. So I don't have any questions, but it's been an amazing year. So thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
And I second that. It's been great working with you, and you definitely hit the ground rolling, which is awesome. So thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Swart.
All right, Kristen, that's all very nice, but now we have to really kind of ask a real question here.
I'm ready. Let's go.
So obviously, you drive up and down the North Shore from Lake Forest through Evanston, Wilmette, et cetera, and you see all sorts of storefronts, papered up, including in Winnetka. We know that. So the question, I think we're hearing it regularly from residents. I think everybody is very concerned about the downtown and so on. I think Liz is doing a great job. Fantastic. I guess my question, have we thought of ways outside the box to, promote Winnetka beyond what we're doing currently? And I just don't know. I mean, I don't know if there are, firms that specialize in introducing businesses to villages. Are there ways that we can, beyond Liz, I know Liz is out there trying to recruit businesses, but are there ways that we can promote Winnetka? And if it took, some money in the budget or whatever to do that, are there ways to do it? I mean, to sort of separate us when a good retailer, when a good food shop or whatever, specialty food shop is looking at going to Wilmette or Winnetka, how do we distinguish ourselves? Are there ways to put us out front?
That's a great question, Trustee Dearborn. Let me start by saying that I echo your praise for Liz. And I am very excited about 2021 because when I look at the list of what she was able to accomplish part-time, when she's here in a full-time capacity, just wait for what 2021 is going to hold. With regards to out-of-the-box thinking, we're definitely always looking to promote Winnetka. And I think in some ways, some of the normal outlets, such as the organizations like ICSC and some of the avenues where there were conventions and there were opportunities to go to get the word out. As a result of COVID, really a lot of those conventions and those networking opportunities shifted from in person to just focusing on helping the businesses that were there. When you look at some of the businesses that have closed, you also see that there are new businesses opening. The Pedigo electric bikes that's opening this week, and La Taquiza and Guadaluanto, and many of the businesses that during COVID came into Winnetka because it's a place to be, says that while we've had some closures, we're still having successes, and we'll continue to work to attract and retain those businesses.
Well, I think that's, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I see the signs that Hometown's coming in, and this restaurant going into Little Ricky's or whatever, supposedly coming up from Naples or wherever. I just don't know how, and again, this is not my area. Other people have strength in this area. I don't. But, you know, how do we separate ourselves from Wilmette? I mean, or Glencoe. I mean, I drove through Glencoe. They're definitely opening, you know, definitely storefronts that are papered up in Glencoe.
Right.
You know, how do we, when a firm is looking at joining a community, how do we separate ourselves? How do we get them, you know, how do we woo them?
Right.
Are there ways to do it beyond what we're doing? I don't have the answer. I'm just asking the question.
There's a number of things, Trustee Dearborn, that I know Liz DeChant will be putting into her recruitment materials. But one of the key things we promoted in our special economic development newsletter was the fact that the village is trying to be as business friendly as possible. For example, we do not implement a home rule sales tax. We do not require a business license. We have not increased property taxes for 7 years, and commercial properties have been hit fairly hard in Cook County through reassessment. So we can, and we talk about expedited liquor licensing processes. We have expedited permit review. So we're trying to promote a streamlined process, and Liz serving as the ombudsman to help them into the community. So her leave behind materials will tout about all the positive attributes of Winnetka. As Kristen mentioned, prior to COVID, she would be getting out into these other geographic areas, whether it be the city of Chicago or adjoining suburbs, and you know, trying to spread the word. But being members of ICSC and going to those events, as well as the North Shore Convention and Visitors Bureau, all help to produce, I think, a network and a brand. But it also, our goal is to kind of create a pipeline of, you know, interested businesses that may want to get into this community.
But
Tough.
I just had a follow-up question about that, which is, we can have a really good marketing program, but isn't it a lot to do with the landlords and
For sure.
the rates and the shape of the buildings? I remember when graders came in, Chris had to do some sales. I mean, he had to kind of step in and say, you know, give me a break, guys. You know, let's find a way.
Right.
And I guess that's my concern is how do we complete the circle? Which, even if we have great marketing, if our landlords or our buildings are crappy, and we need to fix them, or we need to work with the landlords in a more aggressive way, is that part of the plan?
Yeah, so one of the longstanding programs we've had is when there's a prospective business that wants to come in, is a pre-lease inspection, where our key inspectors and fire department will walk through a building before a lease is signed, so they know what they may be signing up for, if there's any improvements that need to be made by the owner or shared with the tenant. We found that to actually be pretty helpful, so that they understand, you know, what's the condition of the building they may be going into. I do think one of our initiatives, once the world may get back to normal, is really trying to sit down with the landlords and have a greater relationship with them to understand what their challenges are, so we can help them find the right businesses.
And that's my big concern, is that if we're a lot more expensive per square foot, and Wilmette has better density because it's close to Wilmette and Evanston, and we are less dense. I guess that's my question. Is there an inherent disadvantage because our buildings are more expensive per square foot, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, some are, some aren't. Kind of depends upon the building. I wouldn't say broadly we are. You know, our foot traffic, our demographics are very good selling points. You know, the traffic flows through Green Bay Road are really an attractive feature for new businesses.
Okay.
So we have some things to tout.
John,
Yeah, it truly is amazing the number of businesses that have opened during this time. I mean, that's amazing. It really is. Um, I'm not sure one of you guys mentioned, I think Bob mentioned someone coming in from Naples to look at a restaurant in Winnetka. It probably, I'm not sure, that's probably a result of a building owner in Winnetka that has a
Right.
Naples connection,
Right.
without mentioning names.
Right.
And as far as the condition of the buildings, if you have a seasoned developer or seasoned building owner, they understand all those issues. It's the one or two building owners that have had property made for many years that don't know what it takes to upgrade a building, to make it more leasable and to attract people. And then the biggest thing, I know you mentioned ICSC. I mean, I go to that all the time too. You know, not that, you know, a Jersey Mike's or the Jimmy John's of the world, those type of businesses typically are not interested in the town like Winnetka or Wilmette, basically, because of traffic count and, you know, just traffic going through. We're dead end into the lake. So it's really not a pass through community. So it's tough finding the right people. And I think it's been great who we found so far, and people filling up spaces of people who moved out. So I think it's pretty good overall, but obviously a lot of work to do.
Yeah, there's so a couple of examples of Chicago businesses that have relocated in the Susan Kroger building. Kristen, remind me of the name. A similar business that's just, you know, that's moving in. But you all recall Town and Oak, which is the, you know, the catering and the event space, and now they're open for breakfast and lunch, doing great business, and they're thrilled to be here. So both of these businesses came here specifically because they saw the business opportunity in our community.
Right. And if you look at the referencing the special economic development report that we did, the list of businesses since 2015 that have opened or relocated, it is quite the list of businesses.
You know, I think the other thing that's
It's a big ship and it takes a lot to turn it around too. And, you know, I think we've been doing a good job for the last few years. Go ahead, Andy. I'm sorry.
yeah,
A lot of work to do.
going to say that, you know, the one good thing is instead of trying to kind of write on a fresh sheet of paper, we have the benefit of being able to identify the things that are organically happening in the village and build on those. You know, I think with the design dine thing happening in Hubbard Woods, that wasn't really something we came up with. It sort of started gelling. And now we're starting to see in that area a bunch of women entrepreneurs opening up businesses. And that's a really cool trend that I think is something that distinguishes Winnetka. And you build that community, you support that community. I'd like to see us do more of that. You look at what, you know, look at Toco and what's happening there, and just the liveliness on that. That's going to, and I've heard from restaurant operators, that is very attractive to other restaurants. It's becoming
Yeah,
like a destination.
right.
It's got a great vibe, and it has the benefit of it not being Wilmette. I'm not a fan of Wilmette, never liked Wilmette, and it sucks. So,
Amen.
so no, I think we've got some things happening organically because of all the efforts you all have made, and so I think, you know, if we can just kind of keep, you know, encouraging and finding opportunities to invest in those businesses, I think they're gonna move the needle for us even more. But
And
the last thing I was to say, Kristen, you've been outstanding. I knew when I interviewed you, you'd be a great fit. I didn't know this thing would happen, the whole pandemic thing. But you've been just outstanding. I mean, having the depth on the bench to get through this time has been just really, really much appreciated.
and she didn't run.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Relative to business opportunities, I still think that the fact that we have New Trier High School in our community is an enormous resource that we have not been able to figure out how to tap. And, you know, there's nothing specific to go into, but it's always been surprising to me that we haven't been able to take advantage of that, you know, massive number of students and, or captive and adult staff that's over there and parents that are passing through. So I'm just throwing that out there again, because, you know, somehow I think that we can figure out how to take advantage of all of that traffic that's going to come here no matter what. Right.
Right. I think the wayfinding package will be important to capture some of that activity that comes into town, and the work that we want to do in Indian Hill. Right,
Yeah,
there's opportunity there to
Right.
move forward with. I also want to take the chance to publicly thank Kristen for all of her work on COVID, the messaging, the employee protocols, the SOPs, all that has taken a tremendous amount of effort, and she is the COVID queen for our organization and done a really nice job. So thank you.
Thank
He
you.
gets a Corona
My
crown.
pleasure. Yeah.
So and if I can just kind of maybe this isn't a wrap up, but in my world, in the investment world, I look at downturns and so on, and the strongest companies take advantage of them. They come out of the downturn stronger than before. They take market share. It's an opportunity for the greatest companies to take advantage of, if you will, I hate to use that term, but take advantage of the weaker sisters. And I think Winnetka is one of those strong companies. And, I would view this, I don't, no one likes to see any empty storefronts. I get that. But I think Winnetka, everything everyone has been saying, and I agree with, has so much to offer. Rob, you just laid it out in 1 minute, all of those attributes that are so strong. And, this is an opportunity, I think, for Winnetka, because we're stronger and we have a lot more to offer, as Rob enumerated, than a lot of other communities. So we just have to go out and get those businesses. We have to introduce them to Winnetka. That's my only point. So, Kristen, you're doing a great job. I think Liz is doing a terrific job. And I think we'll come out of this stronger than before.
Thank you.
So that's all I have.
Hey, Bob, I just would point out that weak sisters, it's a construction term, a carpentry term. It has to do with the beam, the pieces of wood next door. So you're okay. I forgive you.
Oh my God, help me out. Somebody here, help me.
I will. Okay.
Okay.
Kristen, thanks for putting up with me. That's
My
probably-
pleasure, President Rentz.
That's probably the biggest compliment I can give anybody. I have to thank my wife daily for that. So, and thank you, because I know there are times where I'm a little bit more results oriented, and I fall down in the interpersonal sometimes in the zeal for getting things done. But it's funny. I was sitting there today looking at your picture, and then thinking that you haven't even been here a year yet, and as far as a career goes, the things you've experienced when you think back over COVID, Black Lives Matter, and everything that flows from those two, new business openings, all sorts of stuff, and you just fell right into place and have handled it without missing a beat, and gives me a lot of comfort that we're in good hands in your department, and that you're going to crack the whip on Liz and squeeze those extra 20 hours a week out of her and make sure she's doing something good with them. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, President Rentz, that it takes a village, and in this case, it's a strong team with council giving strong direction and policy, Rob carrying it out, and his team supporting the initiatives. It really is an amazing place to be. I've served in a lot of communities in my consulting career, and it really is extraordinary what you have in Winnetka. And I think sometimes when you've been here for a while, not that you don't appreciate it, but it really is quite a stark contrast to a lot of organizations that I've served in. So coming in
So
it
I've
with
heard.
it is an incredible place to be with some really talented professionals. So thank you all for the positive feedback. I will work my hardest to earn those kind remarks. Thank you.
And Rob, we like you too, so thanks.
Welcome. Welcome.
All right, let's get moving. We have 41 PowerPoint slides from Brian Keys that we have to work through now. So why don't you bring them up and
Don't make those pipes explode, please, Brian.
I've promoted Brian and Gio as well.
Gio. Let's see your smiling faces, gentlemen. Ah, there he is.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
President Rentz, I heard the message at the beginning. It was received and I'll be succinct.
No, we just have a lot of questions and you always do so good at answering them all that, you know, some of the pro forma stuff is a given, but go ahead and do your thing, Brian.
All right, we'll crank through it. And if I breeze over something too quickly, I'm sure I'll get stopped or you can ask me questions. And that's a tough act to follow after following Kristen. So joining me this evening virtually is Assistant Director Giovanni McLean. I would like to acknowledge that a lot of what I have the opportunity to present and development of not only the presentation, the budget Gio was instrumental in. And it's great to have that strength developed on the bench in water and electric. So we're going to dive into the electric fund. It's tab 11, and what's referred to in the account number string as Fund 500. So next slide, please. So similar to my predecessors, the budget for this coming year is we're proposing staffing is the same as 2020 is for 2021. It's 35.25 FTEs. We do have a part-time employee, so that's where we get the fractional full-time equivalent. Next slide, please. As you're each well aware of, our goal is providing reliable, cost-effective power to the businesses and residents of Winnetka. We're looking forward to taking care of the infrastructure, which includes replacement, making sure that we're prepared for future demand, and trying to minimize reliability. Try to minimize outages so we have reliable electric service. I would note, and I think each of you already know from serving on the council, but for those that might be listening later on, is this is an enterprise fund. So basically the revenue from the fund is solely from the sale of electricity. The budget before you tonight is $18.9 million in its entirety, and we'll piece through some of the highlights of that consideration. Next slide. So accomplishments we did, even with the impact of COVID, we did get some key maintenance done on the system, which included thermography assessments, line clearance, and pole inspections. Since we put this slide together, we're now up to 34 new electric service connections or revisions. We're trending behind my ideal schedule of 1 mile of underground cable replacement for the year, but we have gotten a sizable amount of that in process. We did respond to 13 generation dispatches over a hot summer, which resulted in nearly a little over 20 days of generation, but more importantly, enables us to get $1.4 million in capacity credits for our wholesale power provider. And we've responded to, I think this number is now up to 27 electrical interruptions. Next slide, excuse me. So similar building from really what was done in 2020 as we continue working on the maintenance of the system, new customer connections, but probably the biggest one on the plate, which we've started with some contract awards in 2020, will continue on, is the expansion of the Northfield substation. I'll talk more about that in the slide deck. Next slide. Again, this is very, very similar to what was done and what I've already mentioned, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward. So sales are trending as you might expect. COVID had an impact on electric sales. We did have a strong summer, but we started out the year pretty slow. A lot of our key organizations in town were closed or had reduced openings. So we're trending a little over 2% below our budget on calendar year sales. We're going to be around 121 million kilowatt hours. We're faring probably better than a lot of our peers because when you talk to IMEA, as a whole, peer group is down about 7.7%. So we fared a little better than most. Looking at where we are right now with energy sales and in the preceding years, we're budgeting for 2021 of sales of 122.8, 523 kilowatt hours. So about 123 million kilowatt hours. So it will be lower budgeted sales than what we had originally in the 2020 budget. Next slide. A lot of moving numbers and moving, so I'm gonna pick through a couple items to call to your attention. So overall expenses are 1.7% above the previous year's budget. You'll see salaries and benefits are down 2.1. There was an allocation, you're gonna see salaries in the water fund go up. So we actually reallocated where some of the full-time equivalents are spending their time. The maintenance workers are doing a lot of water main repair and work. So across both funds, we're looking at a change in salary and benefits of 1.2%. Purchase power, we're looking at approximately a 1.5% increase from our wholesale power provider. Most of that's related to increased transmission costs that they're experiencing. They're being passed through to members. And then I would like on the estimate for 2020, and we'll spend more time talking about capital, but we're coming in low on capital. Preponderance of that is related to several projects that we approved, or I should say you approved, but they'll actually, the expense will hit the books in 21 or 22. For example, we approved a ComEd interconnection contract. ComEd only required a minimal deposit of $216,000, and we'll be carrying a $324,000 in the 2022 budget. We approved a switchgear contract that's well underway. Staff actually submitted the second set of drawing review comments this week, but the switchgear won't physically land until probably February 21. So those are some of the things that I'll dive into a little more detail on the specific categories. Next slide, please. One of the metrics that the finance team reviews with us on an annual basis is our fund balance. So basically the target for this fund is 4 months of operating funds, which is $5.3 million. We closed out last year with the audited CAFR at 6.8 million. We're estimating closing this calendar year at 7.3. And with the projected drawdowns that are in the budget, we're looking at closing out next year at 6 million. So we're still above the recommended fund balance for the operating funds for the electric utility. Next slide. So this is the last year of the rate design that we started with in the 2016-17 rate study. And I see a few people flinching when I say rate studies. So basically the way those rates were set up was that we had a targeted rate, and then we put a 1% bandwidth was around that. So by customer class, you can see the rate increases that are built into the budget. So residential customers, the rate increases built in for a typical customer using a little over 15,000 kilowatt hours a year is 2.2%. The largest increase is 3.4%. And I think this trustee Dearborn brought this up last year. And just to clarify again, that's a rate increase on myself. The electric utility pays for the street lighting. These don't show any potential, the rate structure we have in the rate resolution does say that there could be adjustments related to purchase power costs or a purchase power cost adder. These are the base rate adjustments that are in the budget. Next, please. So because nearly 70% of our budget is residential or our customers, so we focus on what does that look like to a customer. So you'll see those single phase customers, the monthly charge goes from $16.46 to $17. And you'll see the change in the energy. So we go from 12 cents to 12.4 cents for winter months, and 13.4 cents to 13.6. So on a rate adjustment alone for that typical customer of a little over 15,000 kilowatt hours, we're looking at an increase of $45.70 per year. The council has historically asked us, how does this compare to ComEd? So based on a September comparison, the Winnetka 2020 rates and the ComEd 2020 rates reflect purchase power adjustments that both entities levied. And then I've shown the flat rate, which is what was the proposed rate structure for 2021. So you see that we're basically about $100 difference for a whole year from the ComEd rate, or $8.32 a month. Again, that's the ComEd September 20 rate. Thank you, Kristen. Purchase power, as I mentioned, is a large part of our budget, 55%. To give you a sense, we're budgeting 6.8 cents a kilowatt hour this year. Previously, it was 6.7. I'm going to go through the next items just to give you a flavor of what's in the budget, and you'll see some of these things that would obviously, by the dollar amount, will be coming to the council. We still have pending regular permitting that we're doing for the air permits and water permits for the electric plant. We use professional services for that. Aggregate, expect to spend about $40,000. We're proposing our SCADA system, which is our supervisory control system for the electric system. Instead of doing a 1-year renewal on the maintenance and software support agreement, we'll do a 3-year agreement for about a 10% savings. We have some relay improvements on the substation breakers and control mechanisms included. Next slide. The budget does maintain continued programs of maintenance on the distribution system, very similar to what I already outlined. We do have one regulator at a distribution center that's going to have to be sent out and repaired for a bushing problem. We'll be starting that work later this month, and the unit will be actually shipped off site. We will still be doing tree trimming and wood pole inspections and thermography, which is looking for hot spots. Next slide. Again, the electric plant plays a key role in our distribution system in two facets. It's a backup to the substation if there was a problem there, and it's required on peak days, and we get those capacity credits. And so we have a large number of maintenance items to keep the plant available for use and to meet those generation dispatches. Some of those projects like the blowdown tank and the blowdown line, which are used for the control of the boiler water, the dollar value would be items that'll be coming before the village council for their consideration when we get those proposals in from vendors. Next slide. Street lights and traffic signals, there's going to be a modest amount of pole painting done. We are replacing probably between 80 and 90 street light fixtures with 2700 Kelvin light color. So that's to match consistent with the other colored lights that were put in the downtown streetscape. One notable item on the buildings is earlier this year in a surge event, we sustained damage to the pier, mostly what's called the surface water valves, which is a valving system at the end of the pier to let water into the intake. We did apply for FEMA funding to get reimbursed for that, but we're unsuccessful. So we'll be taking that project on next year. Replacement of substation battery bank, which is our emergency backup power for relay protection. And some more mundane items like replacement of a sewer pump at the electric plant. And then an aesthetic upgrade to the gate entrance. We're not proposing to change it out, but it's in need of some tuck pointing and some, the gate's in need of some repair. The big ticket item, as I mentioned before, is our Northfield substation expansion. And this, again, is really being done as a contingency support to the electric system. And we've talked about it in previous meetings. Going forward this year, we've already got the engineering work for transformer number 2 in flight. I would anticipate we'll be awarding a contract for the substation transformer in 2021, with its arriving in 2022. That transformer project's probably in totality around $1.1 million. The transformer firewall was delayed into 2021 because we're not satisfied with the competitiveness of the labor, the bid that we received for installing the transformer firewall in the substation. And the switchgear and circuit breakers are in flight. They're being manufactured, as I mentioned, scheduled to arrive in February 21. And at the next village council meeting, we'll be presenting for your consideration the labor component of it, physically installing those in the building. The bids did come in favorably below the engineer's estimate with a firm that we feel is very qualified to do the work. Next slide. The following capital items are what I'll call is kind of the bread and butter for the electric utility. So new business projects are driven by customer requests. And the $400,000 that we budgeted is recouped through what we invoice the customer for those projects. Salaries are related to accounting treatment for when the line workers are working on the capital assets. Underground conductors is down to make the budget work out the way the targets we had set. We're going to reduce our underground cable replacement on the main line replacement from about 1 mile down to 3,400 feet. So we are reducing next year's planned infrastructure replacement work for budget reasons, and that's driven by the substation project. Distribution transformers and conduit reinforcement are pretty typical where we're at. That conduit replacement is for when we need to do something in support of the electric utility or the backbone of the system, not specific to a customer request. Most recent one, as I presented to the council, is an opportunity to do some work at Indian Hill Park to improve the reliability and the aesthetics by getting rid of an overhead single phase line that borders the park. Next slide, please. And with that, I've briefly went through what's a lot of pages in the budget book and tried to stay out of too much of the rate discussion as far as the 2016-17. So I'll open it up to any questions I may have went over too quickly.
Rob Apatow.
Thanks very much for that update, Brian. You talked about a ComEd comparison. I'm just trying to understand. I just don't know whether that's good or bad. If we're parity is, I mean, should we be, I don't know. I mean, should we be more efficient? Are we just trying to match them? I'm just curious.
So in the past, through, I would say, unofficial direction from the council, we have never said that we want to be less expensive or more expensive, but what we said is that we'd want to make sure that have a sense of how we compare to what a customer will say in an adjacent community is. Now, selfishly, I would say is there's some things that you're getting that other communities are not. You have directed control of what the infrastructure is undertaking. You have directed control that we're putting new stuff in underground. There's some tangible benefits that the electric utility provide back to the general fund financially that other communities may not have. And so in the past, there's been years, in the 14 years I've been here, there's been years where we've been slightly below ComEd and slightly above. And so it's basically just kind of give the council an indication of where we lie compared to our peers. There's never been specific direction to be X percent above or below ComEd.
So if ComEd has major rate hikes, we're not following them necessarily. We're just, okay.
No, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you.
But it's
Although,
also-
I would say, looking historically, that, certainly there have been moves in the past, pushes from residents to, have our utility go away and just, become a part of ComEd. And I think that, Brian is exactly right. I mean, there are so many benefits by being able to direct our own utilities. I mean, the service that we get is so much better, but I think it's really important that we remain, roughly with parity, so that, there isn't a resident hue and cry to close down without a good solid reason to do it.
Probably the place where this most comes into play beyond the budget discussion is through the course of a year, I'll take a handful of calls from people that are moving into Winnetka that were previously served by an investor-owned utility, and they'll call as part of transferring their service. How do your rates compare to what I paid when I was a ComEd customer?
Right, exactly. And so if we're way out of whack, then, people aren't going to be happy.
Right.
Yeah, and we all need to remember too that Exelon has been given some unbelievable advantages from our state legislature over the years that are now currently being litigated. So don't be surprised to see the tables turn really quickly once this whole thing sorts itself out, and Exelon is put on an equal playing field with the IMEA members.
Right.
They've been getting a lot of subsidy from a lot of places for a long time that we're paying for, actually. And second, I just want to remind everybody, what was the net this year, Brian, or what are you projecting for the net back into the general fund this year?
So payment in lieu of taxes, 1 second. So payment in lieu of taxes, I'm flipping through slides, you got too many now. $1 million.
About $1 million.
$1 million in payment in lieu of taxes, and there's probably another $900,000 in administrative services that we net back for the financial services of Mr. Sloth, the leadership team of the village manager and assistant village manager.
No.
And after those warm words, I have a feeling that I'm going to be paying more next budget cycle.
Brian, this budget isn't done yet, so.
No, it's not done at all, Brian.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of.
Well, and just the stability that the ongoing revenue from the electric plant, the electric system provides to the village. I mean, for a village our size, the stability we have is remarkable. So that's awesome. Hey, I have a question that is sort of unrelated, but we had received the trustees had received a communication from a professor at U of I and talking about the IMEA's dependence on coal. Can you remind me what what the energy sources are for IMEA? I thought there was a lot more natural gas.
Hold on a second. Well, we're working on more detailed response, but just trying to give you a sense. There's probably about 70% is through they have on the ownership interest in the 2 fossil plants. And then they have a long-term purchase power contract, which does have a large coal component to it. That's a purchase power agreement.
Mhm.
That contract they've renegotiated and they'll be exiting that contract in 2026, which was earlier than the plan 2035. So their diversification strategy is to reduce their component of coal.
Mhm.
It probably is going to drop by around 40% in 2026. And right now, based on what I know, their board's planning to replace at least 50% of that contract with a renewable component going forward.
Okay. Oh, wow.
The challenge is where we're at today within IMEA.
Right.
Is a lot of that was long-term contracted agreements, and so
Sure.
you don't make to make a change in a short-term period, you have to get out of contracts, which can be costly and undo the benefit you're trying to achieve.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we had made that long-term investment in the plant in Kentucky. And is that, when you say fossil fuels, is that all coal or is it coal and natural gas?
Well, the actual contract with the purchase power is in megawatts, but I
Yeah.
mean, to be transparent and clear about it, it's with an entity that has predominantly coal-fired generation.
Mhm.
So the actual contract IMEA had is to buy megawatts, okay? They didn't go and say buy certain types at the time it was set up,
Right.
but the entity that has that contract is predominantly a coal-based, but it does have natural gas too, but in Illinois, it's predominantly coal plants.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously with infrastructure, that huge, it takes time to make change. So I'm comfortable with that. It's just all a matter of planning. So thanks. And look forward to the detailed
On the other
response.
side, I mean, this year they've added the Green River contract. So that's a wind energy project. You may have remembered seeing some of the
Right.
slides last year. I went to the ribbon cutting and that facility came online at the end of the year and is into this year. So I think right now the agency's at 11% renewables in their portfolio. And
Great.
it's growing.
Good. Excellent. Thank you so much for the update.
Other
Hey,
questions?
Yeah, Brian, thanks for mentioning and Penny, thanks for mentioning the letter from the doctor from U of I. Would you copy us on that? Just, I wanted to respond to the doctor, but he didn't leave an email address or anything, and it's going to require sending a letter to Naperville. I don't know if that's even possible.
We'll be sure to copy everybody on the response.
Okay, yeah, so if he's paying attention, he raises. I think it's good to know that IMEA is going to be renegotiating sooner. I know that kind of 2035 timeframe is something we've talked about in the past. It's, there's not a lot we can do with it, so that sounds good. Just because I ask every year, what do you feel like is the useful lifespan of our power plant at this point? Any changes in your views of it in the last year based on how things are going?
Well, I'd say my first priority is making sure that we get that substation work done. So that gives you that opportunity to make those types of decisions, whether it's partial or complete changes in the generation mode. To the extent we did have some mechanical issues this year and we did scramble. We got a lot of maintenance work. And the reason I say that though, is the fact that we're still able to get that $1.4 million is still very financially favorable to the net line for the electric fund and for our ability to have competitive rates. To answer it more directly, I would project that the challenge we're going to have is that we have one boiler that's the equivalent of the water distribution system, which means we have main breaks or we have boiler tube leaks.
Yeah.
And so we have one boiler that I think will end up closing down, not necessarily next year, but in a shorter term period than say a 2035 horizon. When we do that, we'll have to take a D rate in our capacity credits because I won't be able to meet the urge test at the same value. So from a long-term perspective, without like throwing out calendar years, I think the first thing will happen is we'll end up taking a boiler out. So we'll probably still be able to keep all the generating units, but we'll have to take a D rate. And then we'll see how the remaining parts of the system perform. And if it still continues to show that economic advantage, that I'd be recommending you keep running it until the finances don't support it.
So kind of like a gradual phase out.
Now
I'm
is
assuming boilers are pretty expensive if they're even possible to find.
boilers, we could get a boiler. And we're actually, one of the things we're evaluating now is trying to get some high level cost estimates of what it would take. They can do what's called retubing,
Yeah,
but we're talking north of 6 figures.
yeah.
And so we're looking at what that would cost, what the remaining life would be. I personally think that the steam generation is going to be capped at somewhere around that 2035 range, because
Mhm.
the deficiency in those units is they're not quick start. And the current transmission market is looking for a peak power producer that could come online in a very short period of time. So regardless of where we decide to go with our power needs beyond 2035, there'll be a place for those diesel generators, and we'll need those diesel generators for the water system.
Yeah.
But the steam generation, we'll have to make a sense on, that's probably not going to have the same market value after that 2035 horizon.
Okay. So it's the steam generators are the real kind of issue.
Right, because they're taking, from a cold start, you're looking at, say, 8 hours to bring them off the ground, and the market's not looking for an 8-hour response time. They're looking for, 30 minutes or less response time.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. No, that's good to know. Thank you. Thanks for all the good work you guys have all done in the last year. It's nice to live here, especially during this pandemic. We know we've got reliable power. The storms can be crazy, and
Right.
that's just one more thing people didn't need to worry about this year. And it was nice having that. On that front, have you noticed any changes in power demand with everybody working from home?
This summer, the power demand, we bumped up. We had some really healthy peak days, but those were all accompanied by a lot of high 90-degree days.
Yeah.
The changes that we noticed most in the power demand were that first part of the year when you had the high school and the park district facilities all closed down.
Mhm.
And the school systems, which are big electric users during normal periods. That's the demand was actually on the low side, is what we saw then.
Right.
Interesting. All right. Well, thank you, Brian. Thanks, Gio. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
what you guys do.
And we have, it's similar to what my peers have said, it's done with a lot of collaborative effort of a lot of great people working for you.
Thank you.
We are grateful.
That's for sure. And Brian, before I get into my questions, and I apologize because ordinarily I would call Brian in advance, but I didn't do it this time. So I apologize. I think if we polled Winnetka and said, who's the most important person in Winnetka you don't know?
Ugh.
Probably Brian Keys.
Yeah, no
Because
kidding.
as Andy said, he keeps the electric going, he keeps the water going, and Geo too. But we all know that, Brian, and so we appreciate that so much. But you mentioned the capital, so I have to get into the capital a little bit here. And I'm looking at the capital plan, and I'm looking at the inserts, and I just to satisfy my obsessive nature about numbers. I see the funds. I'm on page 451 of the capital plan, Brian.
Okay.
And I see the cash and so on, funds available, 9 million going down to 3 million in 2025. Maybe work us through this. I mean, I know we've talked about this in the past, and I also look at the capital that's being expended here, which is substantial, obviously, in electric. On page 453, over the next 5 years, $17 million. It shows now, which is a little different than the insert here, that we have that said 15.9. I don't know what the difference is, but where is this going? I mean, where are we going? You talked about the fund balance and the required, the 4 months and so on, that we're okay right now, but where are we going on this?
Well, a couple things. So from the beginning, we've said, going back to the rate study, that the goal of the electric utility was try to fund the substation expansions as a fund as you go and not to take on debt. So one is to the extent possible, we've been making budget adjustments to accomplish that. So the electric utility has no debt. And going back to those, we did talk about that the substation project would draw down the cash balance, the checking account, the fund balance, the term, whatever term you want to use, that we knew that this project was sizable in nature and required. So, I mean, the biggest driver, there's a lot of flexibility on moving like line trucks around, which are sizable items, you know, $230,000. But this completing the substation expansion provides that contingency to the electric distribution system, and it also addresses the aging electric plant. So to me, that's a critical goal. Now, one of the, you know, there's $750,000 in there for another turbine overhaul, and we'll have to have a lot of discussion about, will we get the money out of that $750,000 in the remaining life of the contract? And it's just, you know, we approach the number 6 overhaul as we'll do one more and hopefully get it to the end of the contract period. With that being said, I think Tim and I recognize that there's going to have to be some discussion on what projects stay in the longer range capital and what the future funding rates. So we've been hovering around 2.5% price increases nominally at the residential rate. And so what that does show is that we're going to have to look at either changing our capital spend in future years, or adjust rates accordingly, or go away from pay as you go.
Okay, so you see what I do, what I see as well here, that when we're all gone in 4 or 5 years or whatever, this is not going to be in the same position as we are today. We're not going to have this nice fund, you know, surplus and so on. The village is going to have to pay for this to keep this intact, you know, to Andy's point. You know, where are we, you know, we're going to keep the plant going and so on. How are we going to fund for it?
Well, I think there's the part of it is the fund, but the other part is you got to recognize the offsetting what's showed in the rates is there's that $1.4 million is coming in as lowering our wholesale price. And so there's strong financial incentive, at least when we looked at it before, is to continue to make that investment into the plant. Now, if we end up where you're doing $750,000 on a turbine, and you got to spend north of 6 figures on a boiler repair, then you're going to start looking at maybe we take a partial D rate and offset some of those costs. The boiler work that I mentioned is not in this budget. A turbine overhaul is in the 5-year plan. And again, similar to, unlike a lot of organizations so far, we've not considered or discussed any type of debt instrument for the electric fund. It's been pay as you go.
Right. But if we're going to, this is not, I don't come at this other than that I love the electric service we have here. And I think most people do as well. We want to keep it. I mean, you know, going on to ComEd has, you know, no bid for me. But if we're going to be 5 years out from now, you know, we're going to have to be looking at this different in terms of how we're going to be financing this electric operation, I would think.
Yeah.
And I mean, is that right, Rob? I mean, that's.
Yeah. So in Brian and I's discussion, our priority is to get through the substation build. And I anticipate as we bring that online, get the pieces together, we'll be discussing what are the priorities in the capital plan, and unfortunately, probably another rate evaluation as we go through.
Right.
This is not a static plan. It's going to adjust year over year. And we'll see how this big investment comes about. Of course, there's some replacement that we'll have to do the cost benefit to see whether it makes sense to replace it or not. But we'll have to definitely prioritize it. And certainly we're going to have to look at the expenditure side. We're going to have to look at the revenue side to try to make sure we maintain the utility to the greatest extent possible.
The only point I would make on this is that, you know, this is so far, I think, and this is why you're at the end here, Brian, because you're like the crescendo of the performance. This is where the big money comes in. And I think that when we do the summary to the village, you know, I mean, to me, I would make the point that this is an exceedingly highly valued service in this town. And that, you know, to keep this going over the years is going to take investment. And, you know, we're gonna have to pay for it like every other piece of infrastructure that we have. And I can see the numbers here that, you know, over the next 5 to 10 years, the village, if they want to keep this from going on to ComEd or whatever, we're going to have to make some significant investment here or financing it. I mean, Brian, am I wrong on this? I don't, I
Well-
see the numbers and it just seems very transparent to me.
Well, I think to some extent you're correct, Trustee Dearborn. There's also, as I mentioned, there's some things in there that we'll have some discretion on. Let me give you some examples. We've talked about moving to automated meter reads. That helps the finance team from turn on, turn off, closeout reads, just the physical act of reading the meters is automated. From the electric utility, in theory, we can know that you're out of power before you call us. So that's layered in there. There's 3 years of $250,000 each. That's really something that we can decide at what time we want to deploy that infrastructure into the field. Right. Line trucks. At some point you have to replace a line truck, but there's some latitude on the timing cycle of a line truck. And if it's still running and safe and functional, we can defer that and move it. Those trucks are $230,000 a piece. And then some of the things that the staff has looked at where we could take the electric system to the next level in reliability, and it's layered in there is circuit automation, and that's putting automatic switching devices on our main backstem circuits. Those upgrades. There's 600,000 on layered in there on one on the single circuit automation on line E26. Those are items that if we're not making the budget targets. And we can't do it within the confines of the rate guidance that the council wants us to adhere to. Those are the projects that I would slide out in further years.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that for me to show up and tell you that these aren't things we're looking at now, and to show up is that it looks like we're being short-sighted and not planning for the future.
Yeah, no, I think you're making long-term investments with those type of projects. You have to do that. And again, I'm 110% a fan of what we have here. Whether it's electric, water, refuse, whatever it is, these are the essential services that we all appreciate, but they're expensive and they take investment over time. And my only point on this is that I think that we're going to have to invest, whether it's through rate increases or other funding mechanisms in the electric service here. And we should start, if we haven't done it already, we should just start filtering that message out.
Okay.
Because I think people want that.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
Brian, that makes sense to talk about its ongoing investment to maintain the level of service. Brian went into detail about the discretion in the capital spend. And that's what I was trying to say about what are the priorities on the spend each year. And, where do you have latitude to move those out so that you can keep the fund in the proper condition?
Well, and I think particularly concerning the, our utilities, that it's not just a 5-year plan that we need to keep discussing as a council, but, the 25-year plan. Having done the rate study, as much as Chris loved it, with all these different utilities, has done a great job of educating us, this particular council that participated in terms of the long range challenges, over the long time horizon. The challenge is going to be for each successive council to keep having that context. I don't envy you all the challenge, but that's, it's really important to keep the 5-year plan in context for the longer one. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Because I had a question on, and this is my first kind of power and electric and water, so forgive my questions if it's basic, but how much capacity, excess capacity do we have, especially putting this Northfield station, as far as we providing additional services to others to subsidize what we're doing?
Well, first of all, there's two answers to your question. We really can't provide service to others on the electric. By statute, we can only provide to within our corporate limits. So the capacity we're adding is the electric system is basically has 50. We generally can provide, let's say, 50 megawatts through our delivery points. But if we would lose a substation or the delivery point with ComEd, we use the electric plant as a backup. It's 32 megawatts. with the understanding that the electric plant is aged, is on its way of, we're talking about doing declining generating use in the future. The substation expansion takes the replace of that generation down at the plant. So we're going to trade, we're in essence, for a small period of time, we'll have a surplus where we're going to put in a 30 megawatt transformer at the substation. And that roughly matches the steam generation of 28 megawatts. But at some point, that 28 megawatts of steam will be uneconomical to continue to maintain. Our
So
peak,
what stat, I hate to sound naive about this, what statute?
well, the statute is that we're a municipal electric system, so we can't go poach ComEd customers and they can't poach customers inside. And by village code, basically it says every customer in Winnetka has to purchase power from the village of Winnetka.
Okay.
In theory, I mean, on a simple construct without getting, going and getting you legal references, the construct is ComEd can't come and poach any of your customers, and I can't go poach any of ComEd's customers. There's a few places where that rule doesn't work, and that's where if you would annex, say, what's currently served by ComEd, there's a little gray area on how that works. And so you could conceivably have some customers that are Winnetka residents that have ComEd service. But that would be in a case of if you annexed an area that's not currently served by us.
That's fine. I was just talking about what we do with the police and fire to neighboring places like Kenilworth and Glencoe. But
the second part about that would be is there's some areas around you that I wouldn't want you to take over because I'd have to maintain them.
I hear you. Okay.
Any other questions, Rob? Just that? Okay. Anybody else? Not seeing any? Now we get to move on to water.
All right. Tab 12, Fund 520. Next slide, please. So again, as you're all well aware, we're tasked with providing potable water to Winnetka, Northfield, and an unincorporated area. For those that, again, that might listen to this at a later date and time, this is, again, an enterprise fund. So the revenue and the funds, the financials are based on the sale of water. There's no revenue coming from the general fund. The budget before you is $7.1 million in its totality. Next slide. COVID has been challenging on maintenance on the water system because earlier this year we prevailed a lot of the planned water work because it impacted everybody staying at home. We were still able to get some valve replacement and hydrant replacement and meters changed this year. Those things all involve, interruptions to customers. We did do we're in the middle of our third cycle of leak detection, looking for leaks on the plant. We did get some maintenance work done at the plant, including some taking care of the basins and the filter media and a raw water dive. In the midst of the pandemic, we still connected. We're up to, I think, 30 new services this year. And we've responded to 28 water main breaks and or service leaks at the close of business today so far. And then as Steve, I'm assuming Steve and Jim talked about that, we did defer a lot of our planned work that's in collaboration with Public Works on the road repair and water main. 2 projects did proceed. That's Mount Pleasant and Westmore. Next slide. The budget before you is, again, built on maintaining our regulatory adherence, supporting customer requests for new connections, maintaining the program, the distribution system. The programs are still in the budget. And then the big one is continuing to move towards that funding target of 1% system replacement that was identified in our rate study. Next slide. Some of the budget key items, there's 7 water main projects, a roof replacement, and again, budgeting for the maintenance and the repair of the system and new service connections. Next slide. So water is trending below the budget. We had planned on selling 127 million cubic feet, and it looks like we'll close out around 120 million cubic feet. Reforecasting with that data and for next year, we're looking at about 123.6 million cubic feet of water sales. And as I mentioned each year, this slide really shows the financial challenge that the water utility faces going forward. As we become collectively or individually more efficient on the use of water, our sales go down. And so we have less units to spread rising costs or infrastructure costs across. So this is going to be the challenge for the water utility going forward specifically. And I think it also impacts, to a lesser extent, my peers that run the sewer fund. Next slide. So some things on this slide to speak to is, again, as I mentioned, you'll see salaries and benefits. It says we're up 8.9%. That's primarily attributed to reallocation of some of the full-time equivalents. As I mentioned before, across both funds, it's 1.2%. On the debt service, you'll see that's down 1.6%. And what that's related to is when we did the water rate study, we seeded the capital improvement plan with a $1 million loan from the general fund. Last year, we paid 1 of 4 payments back. This year, we'll pay payment number 2 of 4 back. And obviously, we have a corresponding lower debt service. Unlike the electric utility for the payment in lieu of taxes, which changes year to year based on the revenue, part of the rate study was that we would lock in the payment in lieu of taxes for the water utility at $276,560. And from a services and supplies category, a modest increase of 1.3%. And then as I already hinted at, you see that the estimated capital of 1.6 million for 2020 is lower than budget. And then you see we have an increase to 3 million. So what you're seeing happen in 2021 is we're catching up with what we should have done this year. Plus we had a forecasted increase in our capital. So I'll talk about that in more detail. One of the questions that Trustee Myers, who's no longer on the council, always asks me is, we put this plan in place, how are we doing? So with the budget before you, our water rate study said we should have done water main replacement in the amount of $3.6 million by the close of 21. We, with the budget that you have, if you approve it and we complete the projects, we'll have spent 3.3. So I'm about $300,000 off track from where the water rate study wanted me to be. Slide. And when I say 300,000 off the capital projects of physical water main replacement, is what that metric was on. Similar, Trustee Dearborn, to your questions, we have a financial metric for this fund as well. It's 4 months of operating expense. So the target for this fund is 1.4 million. You'll see where we closed out at 3.9 million in end of 19, projected to close at 3.8. The end of this year, and then with the drawdown and the capital improvements that are in the plan, 1.9 million at the end of 2021. This is again implementing the last year of the rates that were from the rate study. There's 2 pieces to this. So there's the monthly service charge and there's a volumetric piece. So the volumetric piece goes from $39.75 per 1,000 cubic feet to $42.50 for a resident per 1,000 cubic feet. And the majority of you have homes that have a 1-inch meter. So your monthly charge goes from $9.15 a month to $10.50. And with that typical customer from the rate study, it was 1,500 cubic feet a month with the 1-inch meter. That equates to a change of $65.64 a year. Next slide. So this slide is taken from the rate study. For those of you who had to sit through that awesome rate presentation, the yellow bars were our original comparisons that staff used of what I called our neighbors. The blue bars were the wider area that we were asked to look at during the rate study. So you can see how we were positioned for both 2020 and in 2021 among our peers as well. The black bar just off the left side of the middle is where we're at, projected to be for 2021, and that's based on a review of where everybody's at this point in time. I suspect that many of them will entertain rate changes in 2021. Next slide, please. We continue to maintain, basically there's a lot of maintenance work on our water distribution system, as Trustee Kripe made some comments about, we don't want our pipe to blow up. Unfortunately, that's a reality that we deal with frequently. We do carry the contractor resources. Most of that is a contingency for if I need to bring someone in to assist with water main repair or service boring of services that can't be done with staff resources or needs to support staff resources. We paint, we're doing 3 cycles of leak detection. This is to maintain or lower unaccounted water loss. As you guys have each heard me report, we in the winter months, a lot of times we have trouble with leaks there on the frozen ground, and we need a contractor to help pinpoint where the water main break really is. And we still plan to repaint 25% of the hydrants in the next calendar year, which are our 4-year cycle. Next slide. This is, one of the questions is what's it cost to run a water plant from some of the chemicals and stuff. So this just gives you an idea. The MWRD charge is we clean the basins each year, and they basically take samples, and we're assessed a charge for the sludge that's pumped to MWRD. We are adding one interesting tool to help on the diagnostic front of equipment, trying to catch equipment failures early, an ultrasonic tool for $6,500. On the building side, we're still looking to try to do some bluff sustainment. On a happy note, the homeowner that's above the plant has started some work on his portion of the bluff that I think will definitely help the slope sloughing that's happening right now. For I think the 3rd year, I'm going to try to get some type of solar installed. I think the likely place this ends up is at the village yards, although it'd be funded financially, and the benefit would go to the water fund. And again, this is the offsetting portion of the aesthetic improvements I want to make to the entrance gates at the plant. We have a lot of consultant work going on this year. The high lift pump control system would come for you for consideration. We're looking to bring our current pump system controls up to date. For those of you that haven't had a chance to, or it's been a while since you're at the plant, is a programmable logic sequence controls all the flows of all the pumps. There's 5 at the plant, 2 at the yards, at the reservoir. This is an older control system. It's single source to one firm. We're looking to go to a more open, updated architecture. This engineering work should set the groundwork for a future capital project. Those regulatory submittals are underway right now and are carryover. Those are requirements that the water utility needs to file with the state. We'll be coming back with some analysis work that we've done with our peers in Glencoe. And then there's some additional regulatory reporting on some annual reports that I expect I'll need some consulting services for. And then finally, on the expense side, there are 2 vehicles, including one is partially funded from the electric utility that we're replacing in the current budget. Next slide. On allocated on the capital salaries, we, similar to the electric utility, there's a financial treatment for work when the line crews are working on a capital project. We have a roof replacement project. We're doing intake maintenance. This is about every other year we do this, so it's not a new item. Those who have been on the council for a while probably recall seeing that. We are proposing to add a spare low lift pump for additional contingency. There's 4 low lift pumps in service at the time. This year, fortunately, at the right time of the year, we had 2 pumps that failed for different reasons that had to be taken out of service. And while individually one of the failures was not probably that big of a challenge to repair, it's time consuming and difficult to get parts in a timely manner in the current environment. So for contingency purposes, and had it been at a different time of year during peak periods, it would have been a different situation and level of responsiveness required. And then the last one is with some changes that are being contemplated in the Public Works Organization and model on engineering. And in order to have funding available, if we're going to an external source of water main design, we budgeted for the design work for the 2022 water main projects. In the past, that's been funded internally, been performed internally. There's 2 things that we're recognizing here. One is that we're going to have more water main work than they've ever engineered internally before. And 2 is there's potentially a change in their model. Next slide. So these are the projects that I wanted to call to note. So the top 2 are where we have parallel mains in the street that were on Elm Street and Scott. There's a 6-inch that parallels a larger main, and then there's on a 4-inch on Scott that parallels another larger main. Those 2, the 4 and 6, were installed, let's say, in the early 1900s. And as a lower cost than replacing them right away at this time, was we're going to take those mains out of service by moving those customers onto the parallel main. There's the water main replacement projects. 3 of those are a carryover: Gage, Merrill, and Warwick, that were not done this year. And I think the council's aware of the struggles we've had. 2 large main breaks that resulted in actually 8 breaks, I think it was, over 2 main events on Birch Street. That is at the IEPA for permit approval as we speak. And we're planning to replace that main on Birch from Elm to Willow. And then the last one is continue to work on reconfiguring the water main and develop a longer-term estimate for the Willow Road Railroad crossing. And then the next slides, we can skip through very quickly. They just give you a flavor of the project boundaries and what we're looking at accomplishing. That's the end of my prepared remarks on the water utility. Rob said I get paid by the slide, so I added those in. Is there any
More is
questions?
good.
Any questions I can address that you have concerns the proposed water fund budget for 2021?
I don't have any. I think it helps that we did spend a lot of time doing the water rate study and
Right.
and making sure that we have a plan for getting the mains reasonably up to date, like within 100 years.
Yes.
That's reasonably. Yeah.
I think that, that's it's one thing I would like to really thank the council, those of you that were there for that painful part. That's one of you look back at what you've accomplished, and to me, that's a turning point for the water utility where we recognize we had a problem and that we've got a consensus on a path to get us out of that problem. And I do appreciate that support. And you continuing to support that initiative when we get to that 1% funding level.
Yeah.
Well, and, there is a terrific plan, of course, best made plans, right? And the water mains that aren't supposed to burst first. But, I think hopefully with the flexibility that's built into it and the cooperation with Public Works, that just makes all the sense in the world. So thank you for being on top of it. And man, when that one went on Willow Road, it's like, oh my God, it's like you guys really had it this year. But yeah.
The bad part about the one on Willow Road is every day when I come to work, I have to drive over that of new pavement, and I'm reminded by it every time I show up at work.
Yikes.
Brian, I got a question on this water main at Willow Road.
Yes.
I guess I'm trying to figure out what I'm looking at in the this is the page 469, the drill down. So we're gonna spend $200,000 this year on engineering studies. Is that what I'm understanding?
So there's 2 pieces of this. I'm trying to thread the needle, to be candid about it, President Rintz. There's one of the crossings at Willow Road, there's 2 crossings there, has a leak and was taken out of service. We were hoping to line it, and because of the way it was originally designed when it was originally installed in the 40s, we cannot get the railroad to buy off on lining that main. We're going to have to make a decision on whether we want to replace that main through a boring project or walk away from that crossing. I'm reluctant to give up a crossing of the railroad tracks without a lot of detailed analysis and consideration, which I think will take longer than an extended period of time, both in permitting and in discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm trying to do is reconnect some main on the west side of the track, the west side of the railroad along Green Bay and Willow, to make the remaining system more efficient and effective, because the way it's currently plumbed and being left is not really helping the system, and specifically hydrant flows is what I'm trying to get back, some hydrant flows that I've lost. The engineering work, the permitting work to do that in the railroad right of way and the IDOT right of way to reconfigure that without doing the crossing, and then to develop a more thorough estimate on what that crossing is going to be for a more detailed analysis on whether we want to abandon a railroad crossing or whether we're prepared to basically double down and put a new pipe under the tracks.
What's the rationale for not getting, why they won't approve this?
Well, so the current standard has to do with different depths and they have to have multiple, they want a casing around it. From the records that we were able to find is there's the required casings that they want were never installed when that project was put in, and basically the railroad, they're not gonna budge on this. We've went round and round with them and it's not gonna happen.
Well, I guess if do we feel your solution is reasonable or I hate to say it, there's many different ways to go after this. You're reaching a block, but I can assure you there's somebody on the board in Winnetka that, when that house was moved on Scott Road to Glencoe, the train didn't want us going over the bridge, and we went to Newton Minnow, who was on the board of the railroad, and they got it approved. It's amazing how those things happen.
We could explore that possibility. I will say, in fairness to the railroad, that one of the way this was constructed, and I don't know, again, I can't speak for the logic that happened, is some of the connections that would have to be excavated are exceedingly close to the physical tracks. It's not, and so they are looking at not only the casing to try to line it, but they're looking at what sustainment they would want to have in place before they'd allow a contractor to dig that close to the tracks.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Can I continue?
Pardon, sir?
Can I continue?
I'm sorry.
Please. Sorry, Chris.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, so because you got another 500 programmed for next year. So we're talking about 700,000 just in engineering and permitting inquiry.
The 500 was a placeholder for at least that recognizing we have a sizable for a tunneling project, Chris.
Oh, so that would actually be work then.
Yes.
Correct. So the 200 is not all design work. I'm expecting a number less than 30,000 in design work.
Okay.
And then potentially the balance of that 200 in physical construction work. It may or may not happen next year. And then putting together a more detailed estimate of what that crossing is. And I also think whether it's at the council level or internally, there will be a lot of detailed discussion on what's the value of that crossing when we know a true construction probable cost for getting underneath the tracks.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. It's interesting, Rob, you mentioned that other thing that moving in the house. I have a sneaking suspicion that the close relationship of the village of Winnetka and railroad barons at the turn of the century probably had something to do with them not putting casings around those pipes originally.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I'm working on a site right now that had some old railroad sidings, and all the utilities are in casing as they cross under, and it's expensive. You're right. It's a really expensive proposition, and those are deep too, Brian. So I can imagine the shallow ones are probably giving these people heartburn. Doesn't mean that we might not be able to try to exercise some alternative communications on that to see if we can bust it loose. But if you're saying that we're dangerously close to the underside of those tracks, it might be a short-term save for a long-term problem too. So okay, I feel better about that, because I kept looking at this, and based on your write-up, the only thing I could assume was this was $700,000 in engineering fees, and that was a little tough. But since you're figuring 30, 50 grand on the engineering side, that makes a lot more sense then. Thanks. Any other questions?
I would just say that the one thing I like about Brian's and Gio's presentation and capital is that they fully load it. I mean, you've put it all in here, and what I'm hearing is that both electric and water, there's room to pull back if needed, though you have what you think needs to sustain these programs, which is what we need. So, personally, I was looking for ways to, see if there were any issues with water. I don't see any issues with water like electric. I mean, water is sustained largely by these rate increases, and electric, we have an issue over the next several years. I mean, in some way, I think. But I think water is in good shape from what I can tell here.
Yeah, I still think there's some opportunities coming down the pipe to sell more water to other communities in the
Right.
What are the, what
looking at-
are the restrictions or regulations that we face in terms of selling water to other communities?
Well,
there's going to be a component of how much you're looking to sell, because we don't have a lot of excess with the.
No, I just mean from a legal standpoint. What are the restrictions?
it's really, go ahead, Brian.
I don't think there's any legal constructed. I think it would be related to more of a concurrence of parties that you want to proceed. And that, I mean, there would be the legal construct that would prohibit you as if you're trying to go too far to the west outside of, let's say, those communities that are eligible for Lake Michigan water. But if you're talking about an entity that's already on Lake Michigan water and you're trying to convince them to join us, it's going to be a question of capacity or what it costs to put the required capacity in.
Right.
Right.
The other aspect, Trustee Lampier, the existing, the long-term water agreements that are in place, and what is your market opportunity to enter, those agreements. For example, Highland Park to Deerfield, that agreement has been in place for a long time and will last for a long time.
Right.
So some of it is just market opportunity as contracts come to an end.
Right. And then if we were, to consolidate, or, coordinate, whatever you want to call it, with Glencoe, then it would be merging their, what they're allowed to draw from Lake Michigan with us, right?
Yeah,
We each have our own allocation. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and that's it's a long-term exercise to.
Right. I just was trying to understand making sure I understood. I wasn't making assumptions about the parameters of it that weren't true. Right.
There's a lot of discussion on that. Jack,
Yep.
you had a question?
Just a quick one. I thought that there was a international treaty limitation on the amount of water you could remove, and that we had to have that we were limited to the amount of water we could take out. So, and I don't know the treaty or if I'm even right, but I thought there was actually a limitation on that.
Yeah, with Canada, right?
I think so. Yeah.
That's where I was alluding to it would have to be a community that already has an allocation of Lake Michigan water. So if they've already been allocated water, you're just transferring their allocation from one intake to another.
Right.
But if you were trying to get further out to a community that's on well water, then that's where I think those regulations would be applicable. And those some of those regulatory reports I mentioned, the IDNR, is there unspecified focus is making sure that how we're using our allocation, because if they can reallocate that to another entity, that's what appears to be happening. So they can extend the reach of Lake. Well, they're trying to extend the reach of Lake Michigan water supply.
Right. And those communities to the west are pretty far out that are
on well water. Right.
Well, I mean, interesting. Prospect Heights, half of Prospect Heights is still on well water, and that's just the other side of 294 on Willow Road, and
those are pockets as opposed to bigger communities.
Yeah, true. That's correct.
And there's some private water utilities that are still out there. Those could be potential targets as well.
Well, I'm thinking that there might be some opportunities in the future, and clearly, based on what I'm hearing from Points North, is they haven't done a water rate study. They haven't done a water main replacement study and understand the impact of that sort of thing. So there might be an opportunity that's just developing as people become aware of what it's going to cost them to get on board with something like what we're doing.
Right.
I think the other thing that some of the preliminary work that we've done with our peers to the north is showing that some of the interconnects and the level of future planning the two organizations needs to be strengthened regardless of what direction occurs from the interconnect.
Yep.
Some of the modeling showing that some previously long held assumptions are not completely accurate.
Really?
Well, as you move further to the west, all these systems are designed a little different than some people think.
Glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
So,
every year Winnetka reveals something new that you may not have anticipated. So
Other questions or comments?
No.
Awesome. Brian, as usual, you did an awesome job. I love to
you.
bust your chops about the PowerPoint slides, but look at every one that you had in that deck was important and meaningful, and you know, if you can't take a little shot every now and then you're probably in the wrong place. So,
I know I've got it coming. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Trust me,
Thanks,
trust me,
Brian.
trust
Thank
me,
you.
gives it out every week, so it's all good.
So this is this is where I always smile, because I know that President Rintz in probably a few weeks will be helping the electric utility. For those of you who haven't driven past his house in the winter months, he's a very good
Yes, single-handedly.
well, the
By the
bad
way-
news, because of my recent surgery, I won't be up on the roof this year, so I'll be at half drawdown this season, Brian. But wait till
We'll see
next year.
if we can recruit some local talent to help you out. Hey, Brian, I also wanted to say thank you so much for, you know, when you take pictures of like when you're replacing a water main or whatever, I really appreciate that because, you know, this kind of project, we have really no idea what goes on. So that kind of documentation for us is really helpful. So thanks a ton.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I also want to take the opportunity to thank Brian and Gio. You guys do a great job. Thank you. Good work.
Yep, awesome. Some of the best for sure. So, okay, well, that finishes up water and electric, and I think that's all we had on the agenda tonight.
Agenda. Yep,
That's correct.
that's it.
Awesome. Well, we didn't save any money, but we didn't spend any money, so I guess that's the good news tonight. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Rob, you want to do a roll call?
Sure. Trustee Kripe,
Yes.
trustee Dearborn,
Yes.
trustee Apatow,
Yes.
trustee Lampier,
Yes.
trustee Swerk,
Yes.
trustee Caladarchi.
Yes.
Awesome. We stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll
Thank
do
you.
it Monday night. Nothing but numbers. This is Bob's sweet spot here, right?
Water, water everywhere.